Your support helps us bring you programs you love. Go to wyomingpbs.org, click on Support, and become a sustaining member or an annual member. It's easy and secure. Thank you.
The Navajo never eat a lamb. They always eat a mutton.
Very, very popular in a lot of the high-end restaurants, the Navajo-Churro meat.
Just as tender as the school teacher's heart. The conquistadors brought sheep from Spain and Portugal, and native folks just took advantage of this amazing breed.
From my experience, the Dorpers and Katahdins, they've been very hardy and good for this climate.
There are many different parts to make our soil more productive here for us, and so the sheep are definitely one of those parts.
This is a cycle, and if we choose to be meat eaters, then I think everyone should know what it entails. And don't get me wrong, it is not easy.
Homestead sheep on this farm to Fork, Wyoming.
Funding for Farm to Fork, Wyoming is provided by viewers like you. Thank you.
The Spear S Ranch is home to a special breed of sheep. Prized for their endurance and cultural importance in North America, the Navajo-Churro.
The Navajo-Churro sheep, which is the oldest sheep breed in the Americas. It was the heritage breed wool that the Navajo and Hopi used for their rugs that make them so valuable because they just do not wear out.
Because of the diversity from the blondes to the white to the black and the different colored cream and browns, you know, it just makes really nice, natural combinations.
These Navajo-Churros have very fine inner fleece that sometimes is finer than even the finest merino. But then they have this very coarse outer hair that allows them to have this long-wearing attribute to it. They're a feral sheep. They haven't been messed with very much. They've had to survive on their own.
They are not native to North America. So where did these sheep originally come from? First brought to the Americas by the Spanish in the 1500s, they spread throughout the Southwest and Mexico with the Spanish settlements.
Churra, C-H-U-R-R-A, is a Spanish breed, and it was the kind of subordinate breed to the merino. And when Columbus came over, Ferdinand says, no, you can't take my good sheep, but you can take these culls. Right. So he sent the Churra here. And then the conquistadors brought them the second time over.
As it spread throughout the Rio Grande Valley, the breed became commonly known as the Churro.
The Native Americans saw that it was opportunity on the hoof.
By the late 1700s, the Churro became a major economic force for Mexico's weaving industry and an important food and fiber for the Navajo and Hopi tribes. Over time, in the hands of the Navajos, the Churro became a distinct breed known as the Navajo-Churro.
The breed does look a lot different in Europe than it does here.
The Navajo selected for fleece quality and acclimated their flocks to foraging on the desert rangelands.
They're actually animals of like range, you know. The Navajo Nation is in some of the most rough, brutal sandstone country in the Four Corners region of Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. They do much better on browse than grass. I mean, this heavy grass here is actually, they couldn't care less. You know, taking them into that canyonland country just is ideal for them. They love mountain mahogany, love all the different scrub things, and so that's how they could save them. The Army started hunting them down.
In the 1860s, the government began a series of unfortunate attempts to eradicate the Navajo-Churro. The first was an effort to subjugate the tribes. Later efforts were for economic and rangeland management reasons.
You have one agency doing one thing and suggesting something, and the Churros were small, and they wanted them bigger for the meat. The government made them interbreed with larger sheep, They thought as long as you're doing this, you might as well have a big sheep. Well, the bigger sheep eat more, need more, degrade the land more, need much better pasture. And that's what's so amazing now. We are learning so much about how this land supports all the intricate interplay and complexity. So it's a huge loop. And then they took the sheep away from the Indians because they said they're degrading the ground too much. So there were reasons, well-meaning, well-intentioned. You know, I'm not whamming the government agencies. They did what at the time looked like the right thing to do.
Some wise tribal members took their flocks into deep recesses of the reservation, where they remained for decades.
They went into these holes you wouldn't imagine you could get into in those canyons and hid them.
They were up in the hills on the reservation.
And there were a few that survived.
At the time I started, they were really seriously threatened with extinction. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have a good flock of true Churros up here in Wyoming in an isolated area where they wouldn't get interbred, and then we could send stock out to recreate flocks in other areas. It's not like California, Oregon, or Washington. They've got a lot of people and a lot of farms intermingled. We don't mingle here. And that's kind of a special attribute to have if you're trying to save a breed and also select and get it back to its prime qualities.
But other genetics had to be introduced in years past.
Come on, boys! But that's where we have the kind of recessiveness, because to bring them back entirely, you have to introduce other genetic material. And that's where the legs have come from, the more felted legs. That's from trying to bring the herd back and using things like Rambouillet or other breeds to get some, new genetics into it. And I don't castrate any of my rams because I picked them at 2 years old as to who I'm going to use. That's the oldest one here in the front because they don't mature till then. If I castrated, I would probably kick myself several times because the most beautiful, structurally put together and fleece being just to die for would be one I castrated. There you go, up close and personal. He has a beautiful fleece. I mean, look at the length of his staple already, the long hairs.
And I'm not really into all this careful breeding and whatever that a lot of people do. I kind of eyeball it and run by the seat of my pants, but we really have an outstanding flock because of what we've been able to select here.
Today, Karen has taken on the stewardship that Nan started decades ago.
That's all right, huh? And basically in this position, they give up most of the time, especially the older ewes. They know that something's gonna happen, but it's not any big deal. This is just like our fingernails or toenails. And she's a really good mother. This girl, she's a 3-year-old, but she has a really nice bag. But you're just looking for a sound animal on all 4 legs. I'm looking for an animal with good disposition, good mammary glands so they can have lots of milk for their babies, and just a good solid animal that looks like she can structurally have babies.
And with yearly shearing, fleece quality is as important as the quality of the meat itself.
Because these are a double-coated sheep, and the outer coat can be anywhere from 3 to 6 inches long, and the inner coat is just very fine. It's very hard to separate the fibers. So the processing of separating the two to get to the really fine wool isn't going to happen economically. But they felt beautifully, so they use a lot for felting. I twist it and I get yarn from it and make gear also, horse gear, so just another way to earn a little revenue. Most of these have a coat that is pretty much a true Churro type coat. They're not as heavy lanolin, like you can see my hands. I just dealt with 3 different sheep. If I'd been using Suffolk or messing with Suffolk or Rambouillet or something, my hands would be glistening. They have lanolin in their coats, but it is just not to the quantity that other breeds do.
This is important because the production of lanolin is tied to the strong muttony flavor many negatively associate with eating lamb.
If you like to eat lamb or mutton, you always want to eat either a hair sheep like your Dorpers or you want to eat a coarse-wooled sheep's meat. The Churro is a coarse-wooled sheep. Your Lincolns, your Romneys that you find back in northern England and Ireland, usually their lamb meat that you can eat over there is just phenomenal. And that's why the lamb coming out of New Zealand is so well received here. Most of that is coarse-wooled sheep. Whereas the sheep meat coming out of Australia is the fine-wooled sheep.
Most lamb eaten today is butchered at 12 months or younger, but this industry standard doesn't fit the reality of most slow-maturing heritage breeds or livestock not finished on grain.
I sell them at about 16, 17 months. They mature slow, and they're not developed until older. I try not to call them lambs then, though it's truly, for their breed, probably legitimate, but for the world standards, it isn't. And never have I had an issue with anyone saying the meat was gamey or tough, or I haven't had that with the old sheep.
And like many heritage breed farm animals, Nan and Karen's churros serve multiple purposes on the homestead.
The cattle graze one thing and the sheep graze something else.
I do use them to control my weeds. They're great on, they'll eat spurge, but they love burdock, curly dock, lamb's quarter, all that stuff that starts getting ahead of us in years like this.
So that was sort of my overall idea for bringing them in, and it worked beautifully with the cattle.
Sheep eat a different forage than cattle. Sheep are more browsers, so weeds, woody stuff, they're very much more apt to eat that and keep those things down, whereas the cows will come in and after the fact clean up the grass, which has grown much better because it doesn't have as much competition from the weeds. Now, you know, it's never a perfect world and it doesn't work ideally all the time, but also the advantage is the parasites for sheep and the parasites for cattle are different. So when you run sheep in an area for a while, yes, you can have a buildup of problems of that nature, but if you take them off that pasture and you have them in a different pasture where cows were and put the cows where the sheep were, then you get a kind of a natural type selection of what problems you might have. So it's not perfect and it won't get rid of things entirely, but it helps reduce the load, which is something they talk about a lot, the parasite loads for animals. And then with fertilization. Yeah, you can feel the heat in there. If you put your hand in there, you can feel the heat.
And sheep manure is
it's really good.
Really high quality garden.
Yeah, it's not so strong that you couldn't just use it. Mm-hmm. But in combination with our cow manure, horse manure, and the chicken, we get just, and we don't put any of this on right away. So it's always going to sit probably about a year. And the compost we put on the pastures to reinvigorate the grass we have out here. And then also they are a key component of the produce company. So the beds where we grow the vegetables. We create our own compost for growth and our compost tea for kind of fertilization. So, tomatoes are turning. It's just an integration. And then involved in that, and part of that also is haying the grounds. So once we fertilized and got the grass to a level, we try to be self-sustaining. It's just a complete cycle of utilizing everything, but trying not to overutilize and to, in fact, increase the fertility of the soil by using our compost and our rotations. We don't till. We usually use no-till practices almost exclusively. And that just means we don't lose our soil to Nebraska and Kansas, because heck knows we've got winds through here. And it will just take it off. Now, and that's something with the corrals we have issues with sometimes, but they're small. So, but all these areas we try to keep covered. But I raise them, they need to pay for themselves. So I do sell a lot of lambs. I do sell ground lamb, which seems to be an incredibly popular meat these days. And then the hides, when they're processed, we try to use everything and make them pay for their own hay. Because it's not a big enough operation to really make economic sense by itself. Just selling them they're not as big. I mean, Dorpers, those suckers, you can sell them out at a year at 100, 125 pounds. If I get one that's 65, 70 pounds, they're just a smaller animal. This is one of our fall lambs that was processed for clients.
That box is one whole animal?
That's one whole animal. So you've got your chops, of course, and some steak type things. You've got leg of lamb. We do rolled leg of lamb and whole leg of lamb, or this is actually a shoulder roast. And then the shanks are a very popular cut. These shanks are actually the legs, and people use them in stews. They use them on the grill, roasted. Probably the hardest thing that I have to do is decide who's going to be processed and who's not. And I know it's done correctly when it's done by professionals. It's just wanting to make sure everything's done right. Crazy little rascals. They like trees better than they like grass. You know you're killing something. But there's a cycle, and people do want to eat this animal. And so for us, it's just a way of perpetuating the breed, a species that we feel should be allowed to continue to contribute on the planet. So
it is a rescue story, but it's also a marketing story, and you need the getting on board people who butcher and get the butchering right. The customer has gotten pretty sophisticated. They know the cuts they want. They know how thick they want them. They're rather specific about how they cook it and what they like to eat. And as producers, we have to match what we do with what they want to buy.
Up in Lovell, a more modern sheep breed is being used to rebuild poor soil while homeschooling the family.
My husband found this place on eBay, of all things, and started looking into the area. We came here initially just to do some construction and have some property, and hoping that we could do enough on the property to pay some property taxes and raise some of our own food and teach the kids some of those skills. But shortly after we moved here, we started trying to grow things. We realized that the soil had issues out here. We actually didn't have soil, we had dirt. So that began our journey.
The first years were spent trying to aerate the land while establishing grasses to shift from weeds to grazable pastures.
There's a lot of different methods people use to contain the weeds, and they still come back. We never did spray. We tried a little burning, and we thought, well, why not sheep? We started with just 4 sheep, actually, and we've built it. We now have about 800 head running around. But we like the Katahdins and Dorpers a lot.
Both these breeds were developed in the past 80 years and are now becoming quite popular in Wyoming.
Doing a straight Katahdin or a straight Dorper, we haven't seen our greatest result with that. Actually, a mix between the two has produced some of the nicest looking lambs. So,
both are hair sheep, bred for meat production rather than wool.
Because they don't have wool, all their energy and all that forage that they're eating goes to their meat production. So for us, as owner-operators on a smaller acreage, the fact that they shed and then we don't have to shear them every year is a huge benefit.
The Dorper and Katahdin mamas are really good. We don't find many that reject their lambs, or that's what we kind of need because it gets so cold and we tend to have so many lambs dropping at the same time that we need good mothers to take care of their lambs.
And sheep are a good fit when children are part of the farm crew.
From the homesteader aspect, it's really nice. Lambs and sheep are easy keepers, and if they know how to lamb and raise lambs, that's a nice source of meat.
Well, it's an interesting experience learning to market, and you learn things in a course of everyday life that you can use later on.
We gave them the choice this year to try school or to keep homeschooling, and 3 of our 4 decided to try school.
Jenna decided to stay on with the farm work.
I would have been going this year to middle school, so I can't say that impressed me that much. But she's got a nice set of teeth. The teeth start falling out. That means the ewe's getting pretty old, and she's probably almost at the end of fruitful lambing. But I was hoping my brother's in high school, and I would be in high school yet next year, that we could hear about that, and who knows, maybe I'll decide to go to high school next year.
For now, Jenna continues her education on the farm. And with the addition of a herd dog, there's a new skill to learn.
Louis, he's a border collie. We saw him, he was for sale. We had never had like any sheepdog before. We had done all our herding by ourselves, so we just decided to get him and see how he does. And it's been like a lot of fun. A lot of like actually learning for us as well as for him, figuring out how the sheepdogs work. Because like all have different characteristics. Like some like to herd sheep in different ways, some like to stay close to people, so yeah, it's been really fun. I've given a little bit of thought to like training sheepdogs a bit, but just kind of keeping up with Louis now, and we're seeing how it goes. He's a nice boy. I think we all like him.
And guardian dogs are an important part of the farm family as well.
Well, the livestock guard dogs are essential to our operation. We could not do this without them.
Most sheep operations in Wyoming are surrounded by large predator populations.
Most of our predator pressure here is predominantly coyote and fox. We have some smaller predators, raccoons, some weasel, skunk, things like that that are a bigger problem when we're lambing. We do have birds of prey predators. We have hawks, eagles, and owls, and they will snatch a lamb if they have the chance, or prey on a mama who, if there's a mama down in the pasture and she's just had lambs and she's had trouble and she can't get up, a bird will take advantage of that, which is natural and normal. We have had some of our livestock guard dogs are really good about seeing birds overhead, and they run underneath them barking, which is usually enough to help keep the birds away.
Through centuries of breeding, these guardian dogs are highly attuned to instinctively protect their livestock.
They're smart and they know what they need to do with predators and stuff. Like, they won't always run out after a predator, but they'll keep it away from the sheep. Ours tend to do that.
When the coyotes pack up and start putting more pressure on, the dogs are good at going after them.
Yeah, especially if we hear coyotes or something, we'll hear them barking.
It's an age-old way of leveling the playing field where predators are ever present.
We're really not into wiping out wildlife in any way, shape, or form. So the presence of the dogs is a big part of just keeping other predators away. We have treated wounds on our LGDs because they do get into scrapes with things. So we like our LGDs to be able to be handled, even by our kids if we need to grab them and treat wounds or injuries.
We mostly have Pyrenees. They're pretty friendly and nice. What people like a lot about them, they're very smart, and when they form a bond with the sheep, they'll stay out there. Our Pyrenees, they kind of have a half and half with the sheep, but kind of like people.
We actually have 4 dogs with this herd right now, and that's a little overkill, but 3 of the dogs are young puppies who we're training. And what we found is it's good for them to shadow an older dog, but also our older dogs, you can have accidents, and we had an instance where we lost one of our best dogs right before lambing, and had the other dog down with a litter, and we had nothing to protect our sheep during lambing, which is when these dogs probably work the hardest for us. So we have a couple dogs now who are more retiring, and they're going out not doing as much. We have 2 really strong dogs, and we have 3 pups that we're training that are not quite a year old yet. So They say it takes 2 years to make a good livestock guard dog, and we would have to agree with that. They need to mature and get big and strong enough. Ours are out here, though, with the sheep all the time, even from a young age, and they learn very quickly. But in order to be mature enough to handle all the situations they might encounter, they need a good 2 years to mature. And so we try to always have a dog who's ready to take over if we need one to.
They tend to be kind of lazy, almost sleeping a lot, but then they work at night. They do a lot of stuff at night. There might be a lot of stuff out here that people don't know, and it's nice to learn it, and it's actually helpful.
I think it's been good for them to learn how animals work, how animals interact together, what we can do as people to care for our animals.
Then of course, like if there's something wrong with the lambs and the mom can't push them out, then sometimes we have to catch her and help her birth the lamb.
That kind of care can also translate into other skills, professions, life in the future, to show care for the things that have been entrusted to, things that are your responsibility. I think it has also increased their respect for food and where our food comes from. A big part of it for me too is the ethical treatment of animals. I love animals, so I know we slaughter them for our food, but I'd like to know that they had a good, healthy, safe life up until that point.
This episode of Farm to Fork Wyoming is available for $25. Order online at shop.wyomingpbs.org. This program was produced by Wyoming PBS, which is solely responsible for its content. To learn more and watch Wyoming PBS programs online, visit us at wyomingpbs.org.